If you're a creative of any kind, you've probably been recommended to journal at some point by either a friend, a YouTuber, or that shady journal salesman. And I have too, and like you, I've been somewhat skeptical about it. But then I thought, screw it, and I decided to start journaling. Did it change my life? Kind of. So in this video, I'm going to talk about what has and hasn't worked for me, why it has or hasn't worked for me, and how you should approach journaling as a comic creator. I'm John, and I help comic creators complete their comics without burning out. So first off, these are the things that I tried. The first thing was venting. I just wrote how I was feeling about pretty much everything in a continuous stream until I ran out of things to say. That was pretty good at dealing with the immediate emotions that I was feeling, but it didn't seem to have a lasting impact. I'd wake up the next day and those feelings would come back. So I tried a more structured approach, and I'd write down all the things that I needed to do and try and categorize them in order of importance. The problem that I had with that, and I still do to a degree, is that I'm not good at figuring out how long stuff is going to take. So I might think I need to pencil a page of my comic, but that could take 1 day or it could take 4 days, depending on how difficult the page is and how confident I'm feeling at the time. So once I write a task like that down, I don't know how to add another task to the list. And then I start putting pressure on myself where I'm like, I have to finish this page right now because there are all these other tasks waiting for me. And that made things worse. I did come up with a solution though, so stick around. To be fair, Struthers came up with the solution, but I made it work for me, so I'm taking 12% of the credit here. Next, I tried prompts. Prompts are usually in the form of a question that's designed to get you writing in a more focused way. Rather than just venting until you run out of things to say, you frame the thing that you're writing about. A really common prompt is to ask a question like, how is this the best that's ever happened to me? Or what would this look like if it were fun? You might have heard of those before, but they're there so that you start writing from a positive place. And if you start writing from a positive place, then you're more likely to have a positive outcome. But I found myself being disingenuous when I tried this. I felt like I was trying to get the question right because I knew why the questions were being asked, rather than being honest with how I felt about a particular situation. I would effectively lie to myself because I was trying to be positive even when I was feeling anything but. And it was around this point that I stopped journaling altogether. I thought I was just not the kind of person who got any value out of journaling. I'd still rant and vent about certain things, and I'd have random Google Docs with random ramblings that helped in the short term, but never helped me feel like I was getting anywhere, so I stopped. But then I watched another video by Struthers on the topic of journaling, and I decided to give it another go. I think it was a right place, right time kind of deal because I was really struggling at the time. This channel wasn't getting that many views and it didn't look like I was seeing much improvement. Plus I was losing a lot of faith in my comic and I was considering stopping it altogether. And these negative emotions were getting on top of me quite a lot, so I needed to find an answer. So I turned to an Australian, as we all must do in times of crisis. And this video is a result of me watching that video and trying something. So hopefully you watch this video, try something and see if it actually helps. Ironically, what ended up working for me was I kind of used a prompt. I would look at a particular journaling technique and I would ask myself, how is this going to serve me rather than me serving it? That meant that the pressure was no longer on me, it was on the journaling technique to work for me rather than for me to try and change how I process emotions to fit a particular technique. Here's how I did that. I quite like venting and ranting, so I started with that. But instead of just venting my spleen and leaving it there on the page to fester, I would pick out certain parts and ask myself a question about it. If, for example, I was ranting about how I'm finding it really difficult to compose a panel when I should be good at this by now, I would ask myself why I was finding it difficult. And I had to answer that question with evidence. This is key. If you make yourself answer one of these questions with evidence, then it stops you from saying things like, I'm finding it difficult to compose this new panel because I'm a shit comic creator and I shouldn't do them anymore. Because there's no evidence for that. But there is evidence for a lack of sleep or stress or distraction. And most of the time, these are the number one reasons why we have so much difficulty when we're creating our comics. And just by answering these questions, you're giving yourself a bit of resolution to your issue. And it helps you avoid that negative self-talk that has no evidence. It doesn't solve everything by itself, but it can help you gain a more objective perspective on what is really causing you the most trouble. It's not because you're useless or hopeless or that you should stop making your comic. It's because you're feeling particularly stressed, or you're tense, or you're tired, or you're distracted, or you're hungry. And by addressing those things, then it puts you in a better position to be able to tackle your comic. Another thing that I was able to do with journaling was figure out where I'm going with my goals. We all love a good goal, right? That Beckham free kick against Greece was choice. But we also love setting goals for ourselves too. And goal setting is really powerful, but it can also be a huge source of anxiety, especially when we set ourselves deadlines and then we don't reach those deadlines, or we set a goal but then get distracted by 3 or 4 more goals and then we don't end up actually achieving any of them. Been there many times. But since writing in my journal, I've been able to catch myself when I'm feeling distracted or if I'm feeling the pressure increase as I approach a deadline. And so I can keep track a lot easier. Plus, I might find that a goal that I set 3 months ago is no longer serving me. And so instead of carrying on with this sunk cost fallacy, I can drop it because I've been able to figure out why it's not serving me through journaling. As far as deadlines go, if I've given myself a day or 2 days to finish a page and I've tried to get it done, but I just haven't been able to make it work, I'll remind myself that it was me who set the deadline and it's me who can change it. In the long run, it doesn't matter, and this is why. One of my favorite things that Struthless talks about are his 2 lists that he writes himself. I do this too now, and it works amazingly well. So you have your bare minimum list and you have your killing it list. The bare minimum list is the thing or things that you can reasonably do within a given time frame, whether that's an evening, a day, a couple of days, whatever. And the killing it list is the bare minimum list plus extra stuff. So for example, you've got task A, task B, task C, but task A is on the bare minimum list and task B and C is on the killing it list. And the killing it list is there in the event that you're having an amazing day where you're drawing really well, you're full of energy and your confidence is up. And so you do things a lot more efficiently than normal. Or it could be that you break up a big task into mini tasks. So for example, if it's penciling a page, maybe on the bare minimum list, you've got to do at least 2 of the panels. But then on the killing it list, you've got the rest of the panels on there in the event that you get through the first 2 panels really quickly. And in the event that you're not killing it, which is probably going to be the majority of those days because we can't be full throttle all the time, then you can take those killing it tasks and they become your bare minimum tasks for the next day. I find this really helps, especially when you have trouble figuring out how long a task is going to take. Also, this is more of a direct impact with my comic. I'll sometimes write in my journal after finishing a comic session for the evening. Sometimes it'll be a summary of how I felt it went, and sometimes it'll be me writing down the stuff that I struggled with and I need to come back to the next day. Recently, I figured out that when I'm feeling tired and unconfident, it's obvious in the shapes that I use. I was very tired and unconfident when I drew this panel, and I feel that the shapes of the characters aren't as interesting or bold or, well, confident as they could have been. And this is really useful information to know because now I won't think things like, oh, well, it's obviously because I'm a crap artist. And instead I can ask, how tired was I when I drew this? Which is much more helpful and less self-destructive. There are about 1 billion different ways that you can journal. You can journal about everything or niche topics. You can employ thousands of different techniques, and this can often be too overwhelming. Which one is right? Well, they're all right, which isn't that helpful, but I would recommend starting with venting because it's probably the simplest thing to do. Write down the things that are frustrating you or causing you anxiety and don't stop until you run out of things to say, even if that's just 1 sentence. Then see if it helped. Sometimes just acknowledging how we're feeling is enough to process that. But to be honest, the first time you do it, you probably won't notice that much of a change. But if you try it for a week, then you'll have a clearer idea if it's actually making a difference or not. If it is, carry on. If it isn't, then ask yourself that all-important why question and supply evidence for your answer. If you can't find evidence for the things that you're writing, then it isn't real and you can just leave it on the page and out of your brain. Because that's one of the biggest reasons to journal in the first place, regardless of what gimmick you decide to go with. To take these nebulous, intangible thoughts from our brains and put them onto the page into reality where you can face them and you can see them. And when you get more comfortable with journaling, then yeah, sure, try the weird techniques, the prompt lists, the gratitude journaling, the bullet journaling, and see which ones vibe with you. Remember, it's up to the techniques or the gimmicks to work for you, not for you to work for the techniques. And if you feel like you've tried everything and it's either not helping or it's actively making things worse, then don't do it. Use a journal to write a shopping list or rank your favorite Dragon Ball Z characters like a normal person. Cell is number 1. Personally, I like to type out my journal entries on a keyboard. It's why I implemented one in my comic creation studio, because I don't like writing for long periods of time by hand, and I type faster than I write anyway. Also, there's no risk that I won't be able to understand what I've written in the past because my handwriting can get quite bad. I know the recommendation by a lot of people is to write on paper, but I don't think it matters that much. What matters the most is what works for you. Don't feel like you have to conform to the common wisdom or the latest trends if it doesn't work for you, which includes listening to anything I've said in this video. And it also includes this video where I talk about getting in your own way. It's kind of related to this one in many ways, and hopefully it will stop you from being such a dick to yourself.